Let's see if I can get my camera working here. Hang on.
Okay.
So I've not this mysterious black void. There we go.
There you go. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see.
Not
So
sure.
there are. I don't see Marcel or Dan on yet. So there's two other guest jurors joining us for the duration. So for all of the reviews, we have 5 reviews today. We did have a long day with of reviews yesterday as well. This year's class was big enough we had to split it into 2. So it was kind of a marathon. So it's nice that today we have a little more breathing room to work through these. So that's refreshing for Michaela and I. And I'm sure the students who were tuned in all day yesterday watching each other. So it looks like Marcel and Dan have joined. Marcel, are you?
Hey, how are you?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Hi, Marcel. So we're just checking in with the guests. So the other, Dan, hey Dan, are you? I see your beard, Dan. Let's see. So everybody's here. Let's just, I want to check in and be sure everybody's got their audio. Hey, Dan?
Yep.
Dan Tool? You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Great. So we'll get started, but before we'll do a quick introduction. The 4 guests with us today are going to be with us for the duration. It's a shorter run today. We have 5 students total, but I'll start with brief introductions. The students will all know Marcel, of course, of Crow Studio in Woodbury. Thank you for joining us, Marcel. Yeah, they know you. They know of you. So thank you, Marcel, for joining us. Hope Hardesty, who I don't think any of the students have met in person. She's joining us. She is a landscape architect located in the Bay Area. She works for Surface Design and has previously worked for some other really great landscape architecture firms. Ralph Rosling is here from R&T Architects in Cal Poly Slow. So probably more of the students and other faculty know Ralph as one of the San Diego locals on the jury. So thanks for joining us, Ralph. And then Dan Toole joins us from Portland. And Dan has a small office himself, but primarily, I believe, works at Allied Works in the Portland office.
Yep.
On some pretty exciting projects, from what I understand. So thank you for joining us, Dan. Thank you, Hope, Ralph, Marcel. So without further ado, we'll transition to the students. Josue is up first with his thesis title, Reclaiming Public Space, in the manner of a program as a gym/YMCA and parking structure. So Josue, go for it. The floor is yours. Thank you.
I'm here. All right. So my name is Josue Braganza, as David mentioned, and my thesis was architecture should reclaim public space in the urban realm. The existing context should be encouraged to transform into a space for recreation and activity, thus injecting the underdeveloped community with the necessary infrastructure to grow. So what is recreation? I think recreation can be defined as many things. It can be passive or active. Passive being socializing with friends, active being running, working out, being active. It can be communal or solitary. Communal being yoga classes, running classes, or biking groups. Solitary being by yourself, running around by yourself, training by yourself. It can be either outdoor or indoor. So here, just an introduction to my site. On the left is mainly Southern California. In the blue, highlighted is Barrio Logan on the left. As we zoom in the middle, that freeway running up north is the Interstate 5, which in the 1960s actually divided Barrio Logan into two communities, the north being Logan Heights and the south being Barrio Logan. The bridge that goes southwest is the Coronado Bridge, and actually further divided Barrio Logan and kind of secluded it from downtown, which is currently expanding in its direction. And on the right is my site. So here, actually in the red now, is my site. It was previously used to be a bank, and it's actually been demolished. In the background, you can see the shipyard, which is a prevalent, brings a lot of people to the site daily, those being the shipyard workers, and Samson in the center being the main thoroughfare. This is the current site condition. So actually they demolished the bank probably a year ago, and it's currently being developed into a storage facility, which is actually more for the people of downtown that don't have places to store their things, not really for the community of Barrio. So I kind of took this upon myself into seeing what could this location actually be used for. So really looking at the characters of Barrio Logan, you have the shipyard workers, the architectural students, which are us, the foodies. There's a big, I guess, melting pot of different food, a lot of it being Mexican food, and a lot of families. So on the map on the left, you can see in red or pink is mainly industrial, commercial, and in the blue is the housing. So I think there's this missing link between the two. And I think that's where my site in the brown in the center, in the heart of Barrio, is trying to be that missing link. Samsung, again, being that main thoroughfare, headed north into Logan Heights. Barrio Logan is known for its large events, such as on the left, that's Chicana Park Day. People bring their cars, there's a lot of food, a lot of art. Another thing that brings a lot of people, again, is the shipyard. The shipyard has thousands of workers that come in daily, in and out of the site. And that's where I think there's a lack of parking. There's only a few large parking lots for them. And I guess in my site, I try to alleviate some of that. And on the right is art galleries, another gathering that brings people in and out of Barrio, whether that be weekends or weeknights. Here's a diagram kind of showing how many people are on the site. Based on, is it food related or shipyard? And you see that shipyard workers are there nearly every hour of every day, whether coming in of a shift or out of a shift. So then this is where I started to try and subdivide my site. In the top left, you see I created a basic unit of measurement based off of interval training, because I did want to provide a place for people to come and train and basically like do recreation. I really based this unit of measure off of interval training, which is typically found in the gym, whether it be it is proportional. So the proportions are typically 4-1, 2-1, 3-2, or 1-1. And that kind of led to this circle grid that I overlaid upon the site. And if you see in the bottom right, that's where I began to that was one iteration of the wall plan and how I kind of wanted to open up to the alleyway. So here in my final floor plan, I really want to emphasize reclaiming this alley, because the community of Barrio, the people that live there, really use the alleys to, walk between blocks, meet their neighbors, and, they do graffiti there, but that's kind of just Barrio. Barrio is open to that art aspect of things, and really opening up to the street on the left, creating thresholds into the gym. So here you see kind of opening up to the alley, really activating the alley and, reclaiming that space that maybe isn't typically used in Barrio. Lots of them have their backs to it. So trying to open up and use that space. Moving up a level, Barrio is really 2 to 3 stories. So On the second story, I wanted to really take advantage of the roof, create an outdoor working space, using up that space to kind of overlook what is like the harbor of San Diego, which I think is really pretty. So here you can see kind of activating that space, using it as a running track, a place for, kids to come up and play, really activating this roof. The running track running around, you can look into the gym area and overlook the city of San Diego. Moving up a level, this is where I wanted to introduce the parking to alleviate some of the street parking that is mainly used up by the shipyard workers. So if they can activate this parking lot, that would alleviate some of the parking. And then you may say like, well, on weekends when the shipyard workers aren't there, this can be used for their car events. So the car events can kind of take up this space where it can be a car event, it can be a market, it can be an art exhibit, but using these spaces on weekends for other events, not just parking, and hopefully in the future redevelop these into maybe units or a different use. The final level is another parking level, again, that can be activated on weekends, whether that be art galleries or car shows, something for the community to use. In conclusion, I don't think my project is the final solution, but I think it's posing the question as to how can we fill this void or this missing link in communities that have two very distinct and different groups of people, those being the shipyard workers and the community itself. There's a lack of social infrastructure for the community. There isn't really places for them to go. So kind of posing the question as to what could this missing link be in communities such as Barrio. Thank you. That's it.
Why did you choose to do the parking on the two highest levels that have the best views?
I think because when you do have those sorts of events, whether that be car show or things, those can occur up on those levels. I think I was kind of mediating that by using the second floor as like also a rooftop access for the community to use.
So can you describe a little bit, can you repeat again the second level program? I'm sorry, I didn't fully understand.
Let me jump to the floor plan. So the second level program is really like an outdoor gym space that can be used for, I don't know, whether it be yoga classes, just training. There's a running track that runs around that floor, and it just becomes a space that can become activated by training, different classes as well, like the yoga, those things.
So is that like an every day of the week type of deal?
Yeah, so the idea is that this is like, people come to this space, this gym, and this is where they do their running on the rooftop terrace. They do their stretches, their exercises on the roof on this level.
Well, I think something to maybe think about is, the frequency at which you'd have a car show or something on the top level. And, 5 days out of the week, maybe there's cars there. Maybe thinking a little bit about the hierarchy of the views and kind of the frequency of use. And I mean, I'm not an architect, but I don't usually see parking on the very top level. I was just curious what the reasoning is to kind of privilege something that most of the time will be just cars occupying the space for such a prime spot.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk through there was a very big jump from the page before the interval training, basically what set up your formal language. So what's the page before this?
This.
Yeah, okay. I looked at this last night and took me a while to like dig into the diagram. I think this is a really interesting way to map out activities on a site. They're like weird shapes that are intriguing and make you want to understand it better. But then I thought that this grid, if you go to the next page, I thought that page before, which seems to not have anything to do with this page really, was setting up the shape of the building. Like, I actually like the plans, and I like how the circles set up. Looks like you kind of put all your program that has to be hidden, like bathrooms and cores, in those circles, which is kind of like, reminds me of like brutalist parking garages in a cool way. But I think the jump between that diagram and then all of a sudden introducing interval training and finding a tangent grid based on this crazy circle kind of modular language, I think that needed a couple steps before you get to this page. This is like a little overwhelming. Like, maybe you studied some other shapes, but I'm curious, like, interval training, was the idea that this thing is mainly a rec center? Because then when we started to look at the perspectives and the plans, it's almost like a hybridization of a parking garage with a gym on the bottom floor, and then a bunch of other stuff hidden in it. So I think maybe you thought about it more than the way you showed it in this deck. But I'd be curious to see, like, how did you decide? Like, did you decide that the gym component was going to be a big driver and mix with parking? I feel like there's just some program diagrams, and then maybe showing how you got to this language of grids and circles, because the building that have resulted from the process is cool. Like, I think I like how open the building is. It reminds me of like the Herzog Demeron parking garage in Miami mixed with the Carpenter Center by Corbusier, where this ramp just blasts through typical program blocks and starts to open up the building. I think the architecture that results is interesting, but I think you need to clarify the logic of how from studying the site.
So I guess I should have included a slide. The YMCA was a big like influence into like what I was trying to do. They were a case study I was kind of looking into, like how the YMCA has helped community. So that's why the driver was always a gym rec center. And then how do you tie in the community of the streetcar workers on the site? So that's where the parking kind of came in. And the Herzog Demeron parking lot in Miami was actually a big project I studied as well in order to do this project.
I'd like to build on that a little bit. I also like the way the building sort of announces the cores and the way that they read in space. And I also like this idea of the building being almost like an armature, if you will, where there is a structural framework that can maybe convert to other uses in time. Mm-hmm. And you alluded to that with the top level, and I would suggest to you that maybe that concept should be pushed for the whole project. In other words, okay, you're making a place in that urban texture, and for me, one of the issues is the first level, the grade level. I think is really, really critical. And right now, the building feels more like an object rather than actually making what I would call, really urban controlled spaces on the ground level. So thinking of the ground level as one part of this thing, the building moving up as being maybe an armature where things can evolve over time, and the cores are really these great ways to organize circulation and the served elements, the Louis Kahn serve versus service, right? So I kind of second some of the comments about this thing being nice architecture. I wished it made more space at the ground level, that really was space rather than just kind of leftover space. And then I applaud the idea of these open elements up above. Maybe there is something at the top that takes advantage of the view now, rather than waiting waiting for something later. I kind of agree with the thought about the cars having a pretty important place. But interesting project, very interesting project.
Thank you.
I think just a diagram, I almost feel like maybe even the way that you show this in your portfolio, just for clarity, I feel like looking at this plan, the big moves are coming, you kind of explained it, the alley is pushing into the mass of the block, National is pushing into the mass of the block, and then you have a very small push from Sampson Street. So it's almost like, this is a super crude diagram. I don't know if you can see it. But versus the crazy grid of circles setting this up, it almost feels like, I mean, you can see that you did it this way. You picked influences that are urban, which makes a much stronger argument for the shape of the building, and maybe could inform even more kind of integration with the city fabric. Like, what is that? The way you're showing the plan, like these are nice colors, and I like the shapes, but it would be nice to show like the city is that light gray color, like the alley and National and Sampson. It would be nice if that came in and pushed these shapes that you've made, these kind of fillets. If you layered that in to show that it's actually not the abstract notion of circles. Like, yes, you picked circles and arcs to kind of define this language that ties everything together. But I think showing that the shape is influenced from these urban aspects is much stronger than kind of unreadable circular grid.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
I just asked that definitely I was considering that we need to see a little bit more how this project relates to the context, because you see that the drawings are a little bit more abstract in a sense. And understanding how this building fits in the context will be important, because you're talking about this situation that is a very kind of contextual response to the building. And suddenly all your drawings, and maybe in the renders and everything, it becomes very abstract in the way that you're presenting your project. And I'm going to go into the presentation, because when you present your drawings like that, then it tells me a little bit how you're really attaching or kind of considering the relationship to the contextual kind of factor of just volumetrically, but also the factor of human factor, how you're relating with people and what you're understanding for people. So I still have a little bit difficulty of understanding why the gym, and what spurred the gym a little bit more. What is the intention, how the analysis or the study of the context of the people and the behavior kind of sway you to say, is the gym appropriate? And then the other thing, right? So I think that there, I think we need to elaborate a little bit more. And then when you do that, then you will start also making your drawings understanding what type of people we're designing for. What I'm saying here is that also in your drawings, we're missing the entourage and people, in the sense of understanding what are the scenarios that you're constructing. And in that entourage that you start kind of animating your floor plans, we will understand more what a type of people you're talking about, and how the shapes and elements are really influenced in that sense. Then the other factor, I will say that the type of drawing that we usually do, floor plans, maybe elevations, we're missing some sections, that we need to kind of understand these things more at the level how, even questioning the type of drawings that we do. That we usually do drawings, floor plans, but we can hybridize drawings, and we start kind of constructing specific drawings that help us portray what is the main concept of your project. Not anymore, we can hybridize a section perspective, a floor plan with an axonometric. We start doing drawings that really specify what your intent of your concept is. And I'm doing that because I think that the process of thinking, the process of researching, the process of going through the element of design, it goes through the drawings itself also. It's not just a generic section or generic floor plan, a generic perspective that I've seen now, for instance, even in your perspectives, suddenly the architecture is becoming kind of diluted in many ways, and in a way is becoming very, very kind of background, but we don't know how that is really engaging into the livelihood or the way that people are using these elements. I think that even the way that you portray these people in the renders, they are like person in Logan or could be in Europe, right? So I think a little bit more about understanding that, I think could understand that. Also, right, we were talking about the architecture, the elements, how are framing that sense. Anyways, I think the geometry, now going into the geometry, I think that the geometry of the elements, when you do this curvature, when you do your studies, I think it will be interesting to kind of start a way you measurement, a way you evaluate these things. For instance, the curvature, the size of the circles, the elements of these things, a way to measure these decisions, a way that you can say the scale of this circle, the scale of the curvature, the scale of doing these elements are giving me this. So if I do this, I gain this. If I do that, I gain this. A little bit of how you can start evaluating that process. I think that it will be nice to kind of even show it to understand it, because the diagram you did before, can you go to the circles? Like for instance there, I don't know how you were able to evaluate it. Maybe you have in your mind, but it will be interesting to see how these really are really responding and reacting there. I think there's a little bit of series of diagrams or vignettes that start strategizing how these things, particularly very responsive to contextual and to particular activities. And then there are the ways you evaluate this information.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it was said before that there's the partee that comes from the study on the left side of this drawing, and then somehow the program needs to enter into the picture in these diagrams. I think so it really starts to embrace, you know, what are the programs, how are they responding to this idea of construction of space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having that step in these diagrams, like you start to have it in your bottom right where you're engaging the actual context. But again, you know, I'm personally not seeing those spaces as habitable space yet, and that's partially, I think, due to the fact that they haven't been drawn. So I really agree with the idea that, you know, having something like a section perspective where you can actually see the people in the space would really be helpful on a project like this.
All right. Well, thank you, Josue. I don't want to repeat any comments. I think those are really instructive. But I do want to say nice job on the early part of the presentation, especially for those who aren't as familiar with Barrio Logan and San Diego. I thought you did a nice job giving us good images about Barrio Logan's culture and the context. So well done on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to design that space that's in between the building and the alley.
In the alley.
I'm really excited about it.
Agreed. That's an awesome hidden plaza. I really like that part too.
Yeah.
I don't think that this doesn't do it justice. This feels like I was curious, like one last question maybe. What do you imagine the materiality of your building? What do you imagine the structure and the materials? Is it all it's all white?
Yeah, it's all white here.
But what do you imagine that's made out of? It could still be white.
I was imagining concrete, to be honest, but maybe painted white. I like the white.
Yeah, it's abstract. I mean, it's nice. The thing I like about this building a lot, or just the notion of it, because it's you need to do some sections and take some time to really document, like other reviewers are saying, make the plans, like look, whoever your favorite architects are right now, if you really like that Herzog Demiron garage or whatever, it looks like maybe you look at some Morphosis too for the plans. Like look at those plans and the drawings, like take some time, since we all have a little bit of extra time right now, as you prepare your portfolio. Like I think do drawings that you feel are an extension of the character of the design. So I think there's a lot of, like, there's a John Lautner house that I think it's called the Arango house, but look at the plans for that. There's this amazing bleeding of the landscape through the section. But the thing that I find most powerful about this, the building doesn't really need windows. Like, even this glazed area down there on the alley, those could all be sliders, or the doors could all open. And really, you made like infrastructure for working out, running, and basically pulled the street fair up onto the roof, which I think needs to be played up more, because in the renderings, it's true, the building looks like the background. Like, it looks like not as important as it should be. So stuff that influences you and takes some more time to represent this for your portfolio.
And also to that point, I think, you know, anytime in plan or in for instance, this rendering where you start to represent some sort of barrier between interior and exterior is an opportunity to think about a bit more as a threshold and a gradient. So like, even, you know, the fact that you designed this where there's a sidewalk sort of separating this green artificial turf area and these glazing, like, you know, what if there's a way to continue the language of what's happening on the floor inside the building out into that space, so that it doesn't feel necessarily like, you know, a threshold there. I think is a way to really activate the building in relation to the context.
Yeah. No, I should have. Yeah, ground textures I think would have been important here.
And in the plan, you know, when you're thinking about that space, you know, thinking of that backside of that open space is maybe programmatically being more related to the building, and as you know, get closer to the street, activating it in a way that sort of draws people in rather than you know, necessarily kind of creates a divide. Yeah.
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Josue. Thank you for the comments, everyone. We're going to now pass it over to Corey Turk. So Corey, go ahead and share your screen. And for everybody, I'm going to send you the address. So if you'd like, we can open it up in Street View or Maps to help locate.
All right.
So Corey, whenever you're ready.
All right, I'm Corey Turk. This is my thesis project, the receiving tower. Starting with the concept, your time is one of the most valuable things that you have. Everything and everyone is in such a rush to get tasks done and to move on to the next thing. Using technology for leisure instead of production will allow us to create time. When you create time, more opportunities are available to take advantage of for leisure. Creating a multi-purpose skyrise tower will allow for different programs to be in one building. Being able to spend time with your family or take advantage of the many different programs in the building is now feasible. Utilizing technology and passive systems will create a receiving tower for leisure. Using the above and below junk space and a 4-foot grid system with bearing walls 24 foot apart will allow for a flexible and adaptive floor plan to change the building over time. The future is now. Going in, jumping into the designs, I start off with the section. This section is a study section that was developed to explore the relationship of technology and leisure. They are dependent on each other. Taking advantage of the junk space, the building has started to transform. This allows for some double height ceilings in areas for large leisure programs to be implemented. Moving on to the site plan. This project is located at 801 A Street in San Diego, California. It's downtown. This location is great for skyscrapers to be built and receive technology for leisure, allowing surrounding residents to take advantage of the bottom floor drive-through post office and retail space. This will keep it connected to the neighborhood. This location has an existing tower to the west, and I am proposing phase 2 for the lot. This location is close to the harbor, railroads, and airport. This will allow goods to be transferred by drones or trucks with ease. This is the southeast rendering, revealing the perspective view from the ground. This next rendering is for the drive-through post office. Moving on to the residential units. There are a variety of different floor plans. Some are one-story units and some are two-story units that have adapted and taken advantage of the junk space. There are 3 central cores in the building. Elevators and stairs are programmed in the cores. There's also open chutes for mechanical equipment and drone delivery systems. Moving on to this rendering is a rendering of a package being delivered to the residential unit. A delivery area will allow easy access for goods to come in and out. Moving to the gym and restaurant. Creating more time for leisure allows for many programs to be installed in this building and to get taken advantage of. A gym and restaurant is a great way to self-improve and enjoy leisure time. Moving on to this rendering shows a locker room and bathroom that resembles a resort concept area to prep and get ready. This rendering is of the gym. Being able to stay in the tower to get a workout in is a step in the right direction for leisure. Moving to the combination plan. This floor plan shows a relationship from residential units to the basketball court or to the pool. Traveling is minimized to maximize the time for leisure. Here I show a rendering of the basketball court. It's family having time together. This next rendering is of the pool. People are taking advantage of it and relaxing and enjoying the pool and spa. To the bridge. This floor plan is showing the relationship between the residents and the greenhouse garden. This allows residents to grow food and stock the mini grocery store shelves. Gardening is a great way to relax and enjoy leisure while also giving back to the residents. This rendering is a residential unit, showcasing leisure with time of gathering. This next rendering is of the bridge. The bridge is connected to the existing tower, having a garden on the top and the greenhouse, using the natural sun, while the bottom is taking advantage of the wind between the buildings with wind turbines. Lastly, the rooftop. This is the top of the building roof plan. It allows for drones to deliver goods from local areas. It has landing docks and conveyor belts to pass along the items to the central core. The chutes will allow for circulation to different areas throughout the tower. This is a rendering of the rooftop. Thanks.
How do you see this building giving something back to the community at the ground level? What's happening at the ground level that's going to make this really feel a part of the city?
There is, I can zoom out for you. On this side, there's a lot of retail space. The existing building already has a coffee shop and everything. So I wanted to capitalize on that and make this a central courtyard for gatherings. So the retail space is one thing that people can come and enjoy. Also on this side is a drive-through post office. Goods being delivered by drone or by truck. They are, not all buildings are going to be able to have this feature. So I wanted it to still be connected to maybe having this central spot to have goods. You can come and pick up like a package or something that was delivered by a drone if you're not able to get it into your actual unit.
What about your sense of arrival as a resident and how you experience coming into the building as a resident? Because it seems like you've got almost service like elements that kind of mixed together with entry experience.
Yeah, so I feel like this is definitely a service area floor plan. The residents would have to bypass this. There's stairs on the top right over here that allows you to go up to the second floor balcony, and also these central cores are also having elevators and stairs that can go ahead and bypass up through to the next level.
Do you have a rendering of that courtyard space? How you're developing the retail and
I don't.
that connects with the city?
I don't at the moment.
Okay.
We only had 5 minutes, so I didn't think that was too crucial. I wanted the building to be showcased more than the site.
Well, I think every building that touches down in a city has an obligation to do something with the city, to make some kind of connection with the city. So I think it is important, actually.
I think it's actually the most important aspect of the project. The reason being what Ralph just said, but also, if you're a resident coming back, you're not living your entire, unless you're proposing that someone can be completely self-sufficient living in this building 24 hours a day, which, maybe during this quarantine time seems totally plausible. I think most residents, especially if they're looking for a luxury tower experience, really care a lot about that 5 minutes or 10 minutes that they spend every day going in and out of their house. And from what I understand, it seems like maybe that center space is covered at the moment. Like, is it open air or?
Yeah, it's open air. This is the bridge
It's
above.
open air.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And
that bridge is on the top
okay.
floor of the existing tower.
I thought the bridge itself was actually really cool. And I think you can start to think about maybe that courtyard area being something that's both beautiful and functional. You're starting to introduce, these ideas of sustainability on the bridge. Is there a way to translate some of that onto the first floor, which of course is quite a lot more real estate. And in and of itself, from my perspective, is a huge project.
Yeah.
So it's something you might want to start to think about as you move forward with this. Because I want to applaud you. I think in general, what you presented is pretty thorough, and the scale is pretty clear, which I appreciate. There's a lot of real world sort of understanding for me. I can think of spaces that I've been to that feel like this. But yeah, that's a huge missing piece. But yeah, I can see that you put a lot of effort into everything else. So I understand that there's only so much time in the world, but going forward, I think, maybe think about it in a different way, not as being the least important, but something that's crucial to the project.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't mean to downplay the site. I feel like this building and tower could be implemented in a lot of the major cities where skyscrapers are developed. I feel like this is I was shooting for like a new typology in a way where all these services and flexible floor plans will be able to change over time with technology to create a different space. So I do have floor plans and everything set up now, but over time, I feel like a lot of this could adapt and change. Therefore, this building could probably be implemented in Chicago or Miami or something like that, taking advantage.
Right, and so the courtyard obviously would look very different in all those places.
Correct.
San Diego, I think it would be a pretty great place.
Yeah, nice weather.
So, yeah, I wanted to just see, it sounds like you are reading about junk space quite a bit, and I just wanted to understand what your interpretation of that is first?
Okay. I was using the junk space.
Well, no, what, not in your project, but what's junk space in general? Your
Like the attic and crawl space of a building.
Okay, so just service spaces.
Service space, yes. That's
Guts. Oh yeah, we didn't see this diagram very. Okay, so like, I gotcha. It's kind of like everything that's hidden.
Yes, very concealed. I was thinking more of like a mechanical equipment and the drone flying service to go through there.
Right.
Also, as technology advances and mechanical equipment gets smaller and everything gets more efficient, you don't need that much space anymore, and so it could be taken advantage of and adapted into the floor plans to expand.
Right. Yeah, the section diagram there looks kind of like the Salk Institute where you have the service plenums.
That's right.
One. I don't know if that's what you're looking at. I like your building's kind of like you could almost take the residential units out and it's like an urban shipping center almost. Or it's like a machine, really. It's almost more industrial, infrastructural than anything else. So I think that's its strength, because looking at the unit plans too, like you worked out a lot of stuff. I'd like to see not the short section, but the long section, or an elevation showing, like all these voids that you have placed. You can see it in the perspective, but just seeing some of these spaces like the pool and the basketball court and the drone arrival center up top and the charging station, all that stuff, it's really rich. Like, it's a super rich project, and I agree. I think that you could take this thing and drop it into any city. One thing I do think, like, there's a couple things that stand out that just kind of made me curious. Like, so with the post office, is that something specific to downtown San Diego that's missing, like a 24-hour, or why did you pick that as the kind of showpiece program on the ground? Is that something specific to that city that's an issue right now?
It's not that big of an issue. I was thinking more of having packages being able. This is a receiving tower, so being able to receive packages from all around, and having access for people that don't live here to still be able to use that service of delivery system.
Okay.
So that was a connection.
Okay.
To just connect back to the residents around the neighborhood.
I gotcha. So instead of people using these cores that live there for drone deliveries, like your dog food from Amazon or something, you want the whole building to also serve the whole urban community, not just the residents. That makes sense to me, but I think from your renderings, like, I gotta say, your sections and plans, like your renderings, you should kind of scrap all of them and figure out ways to blow up parts of your, like, this is a really rich section. Like, you went kind of crazy in here now that I can see the plumbing rooms next to the fans and everything. Like, the renderings are kind of like, the perspectives inside look scary. Like, it looks like generic white boxes. Like, I think there's a better way to show the character of the building on the inside. I think that the building that you've drawn here is much more interesting and vibrant than the perspective renderings. I feel like those are not a good selling point. But I was curious. I feel like from a design standpoint, if it's a post office, it's kind of a distribution center, whatever. If you go to the ground floor plan, yeah, there's like a giant wall covering up the post office in the middle right there. I feel like if the post office right now, like, just the way it's drawn, feels like where the meter maid for the parking garage sits and tells you left your car for too long. Like, I think you need to really rethink, like, maybe shift the post office to the street. Like, that wall that's on the bottom in the middle, you got to get rid of that wall, because other than signage, you don't even know that there's kind of something special for the whole city hidden in the middle of this block. Like, that's kind of you got to announce that more. Like, let these things, just like you did with the basketball court and your drone charging center and the roof, which is awesome. Just as you did with those, this has got to be more heroic at the ground floor. And I think it ties back into, I really like, after looking in Google Street View at the existing tower here, that the retail would be really interesting. And I almost think you got to take the hybridization of the new distribution technology that you're mixing in here into every component. So maybe those retail spaces become like mini vendors that are getting their supplies from the drones. So they would, because right now it just looks like that could be like a whatever, totally independent of the building. I think that this plan needs some more love on how you basically let all this crazy stuff hit the city.
Yeah, I just building on that a bit. Maybe there's ways where the retail side could be more porous and let people into the post office thing, so it communicates with the courtyard between the two buildings, which I think actually could become the most successful space on the whole project. That courtyard, and you may want to consider entry from both sides into your public spaces. The other thing is that if this post office is serving the whole community, it could be a social event. I mean, it really could be a grand and interesting space where, people hang out, and, maybe there's a place for them to have something to eat too while they're at it. I mean, it could be a really great place for people to meet. So anyway, more thought for your project.
I think it would really be a quick and easy exercise for you to just overlay this site plan at a more zoomed out scale with all the adjacent buildings and sidewalks and all this, and just start, lay a piece of trace over and start to draw like where people are coming from, and you'll start to see that there are these natural sort of flows that are going to affect how people are going to, naturally want to come into this building. And I do think, and I'm not totally clear what's happening on the left and right hand side contextually, but that could be a great grand boulevard, for instance, through that main space. So really taking a bit of a step back somewhere in between your huge site plan and the neighborhood scale will really benefit you.
I thought this rendering would show it a little bit more of what's going on down here, because I did fill it out and design it. I just didn't take a rendering of it.
It reminds me a little bit of David. What's the building? Michael's building, Michael Malton's building in downtown LA that we went to.
The Star Apartments.
No, the one that was along the river. The whole retail along the whole face.
One Santa Fe.
One Santa Fe. Maybe that's a good precedent to look at.
Okay.
A lot of street activation.
Yeah. And also the scale and articulation of these big planes.
Yeah.
Some lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
One thing I couldn't help but think about when looking at the plans and how many floors there are for almost like vertical drone moving. Did you ever think like drones move around the outside of the building? Like they can still arrive and charge and move around, but could there be a benefit if you have decks like something to not eat up the square footage of the building, because you actually have quite a bit of core space, and it seems weird that the drones need to move in these shafts inside the buildings. Like, wouldn't it be more easy if they move around the outside only and you use more of the square footage of the building for other things? Did you think about that?
I did. One of the first driving factors was I did some research on drone delivery systems. It's actually going to be implemented in San Diego. Well, it's supposed to be this summer, but it might probably get postponed. But their flying height is between 200 and 400 feet. So they're not really supposed to be flying below that unless dropping a package off in a very clear, the very safe area, basically. This section I did explore going in and penetrating the outside of the building and stuff. But I felt like this building could benefit more if I hid all the moving parts, all the technical aspects and the technology. If it was out of sight, out of mind, and really just being able to benefit and serve the residents and the users of the building. So that, I guess that was my main thing on being able to use a structural system. Those three cores was and the grid. You really being able to have a flexible floor plan in the interior kept my rigid bearing walls, I guess, as a grid, and so those central cores kind of helped it out as well.
Okay.
And I guess that kind of goes back to that one wall on the site plan that you guys want me to get rid of. It's a major bearing wall on that side of the facade, so I guess that was my main reason of leaving it. Just because reinforcing this grid system that I have for the structural components of what's going on in the building.
I think it's a good system, and I think that's worth a diagram actually showing the structural system, and doing it maybe in an axon too would be really nice and clear to separate it from all the other program. But with how heroic of a building this is, like, yeah, I see it. But there's ways to get around spans and things. The one place that it makes sense, there's multiple places to break this system, and I think that's what's beautiful about the project. So imagine dropping this into Miami Beach or like Rio or someplace with a lot of grade. When it hits the ground, you can set up a few rules like, okay, I need to use big transfer beams. It can adapt and change and almost adjust to regionally specific contexts for cities, or even if you imagine it like a Le Corbusier housing project out somewhere without towers around it. There are rules that you set up that you can break to make special kind of intersections with reality. And that post office is one of them.
Gotcha.
Hi, Corey, can you go back to your perspective, the one overall? Can you tell me where is the 300 and the 400 there? Where's the 300 threshold, and then I know the top already, but the 300, where it will be in that perspective?
It's right below the bridge. So the bridge is from the top, probably down 4 levels. So I would say lining up with these windows here, this balcony. So I guess this floor would be the 200, and then the 400 would be
Somewhere there up there, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere up here.
Do you think, for instance, now even you right now, it took you, because you know the project, but it took you a little bit to understand that datum, and I think that's when you said that, for me was like, why the building looks the same all the way through. I think could have been really great that datum now is an opportunity to really differentiate the building and saying, well, this is where the building really becomes very particular, and really is taking advantage of that condition that you're setting up for yourself, because it seems that that's the main side of your project, that's the datum, that's the area of the drone and the information, and that's where we're going to say, well, the future of the buildings, if we're going to incorporate this series of parameters, now the buildings are going to kind of take advantage of this in this way. Now, by doing this, we're going to take advantage of how that is going to be incorporated. So for me, it's a little bit confusing, because then I don't see the how you're taking advantage of that, because I can see you're treating it almost the same, the second floor, the third floor from the top floors.
Yeah, I am treating it the same. I guess this came about because of when I designed the rooftop and the central cores for the chutes and the drone systems to be able to have that circulation through those main 3 cores. That was service enough for the whole building. I didn't think, I totally understand what you're saying, that this building could definitely change going up, but in the same time, I thought that I resolved the issue for the need of flying into the side of the facades by having these central cores that actually can service the whole building.
Well, it could be. I think that I don't know. For my opinion, I think this is a great opportunity to really now see design, right? How design can really engage that parameters, and how you as an architect can really take advantage of that circumstance. I will say that I see you're reading Delirious New York and REM and doing all the stuff, right? Trying to get it. But I think that if you read a little bit more of what Delirious New York was trying to tell you, right, that there was a retroactive manifesto of New York, right, and saying, well, this is a little bit like how the future of our cities are going to be engaging, and how the different kind of floor slabs were going to kind of say creating these inner worlds, and then they're stacked to each other. I think you're replicating that idea in a way that's saying just every floor is a universal thing, but at the same time you're saying no, it's not, and then saying we need to kind of contest that idea of how this is not just a pancake approach. And then unfortunately what I see in your project is just repeating this pancake approach, and they never see this kind of opportunity to change that. And that's thing that the parameters you set for yourself then are the opportunity to contest this idea of REM. And I think you need to kind of also, if you want to go back and saying, well, this is the way I align to REM, and this is the way I deviate from REM's ideas. And this is the way we need to start thinking how the new typology is going to construct that. So clearing up that verbally in diagrams, but architecturally, I think is will be beneficial.
At the same time, I think you also have to define what leisure is. What is this idea of happiness and leisure?
Totally agree.
Did he just freeze? He's frozen on my screen. I'm not sure if he's done talking or not.
Yeah, he's frozen in my also. But I think taking what he was saying, I totally agree that the idea of leisure and technology, I think that's what he was asking, and yeah, I agree that how these idea of leisure and the type of leisures and the future type of leisure.
Pool slot through the building for the pool, the pool slot through the building for the basketball, and that sort of thing. But how about in the units themselves? You know, what is that? Anyway, just this sort of a rhetorical question coming from me, because it's at the heart of your project, and I think you need to address it in the way that you've set the project up for yourself.
Yeah, I try to explore, I guess, more of this leisure and technology and the relationship through this section, being able to hide the moving architecture and service needs, but also being able to service like the residential unit and create, I mean, kind of like a lazy effect or a more comfortable environment, like having, you know, a drink from the fridge being able to shoot up to your nightstand, so that kind of eliminates the need to go to the kitchen in the middle of the night, or kind of having your wardrobe flown in and you got a new shirt that's hanging in your closet that you didn't have the night before. So I think it was explored here, but yeah, I definitely agree that a little bit more explanation and diagrams could have.
I think it's more than the mechanics and the engineering solutions and the appliance kind of approach. I think it's more than that. It's got to be something about the space. It's got to be something about how you're taking advantage of the views. It's got to be at a very elemental level too, as well as a technological level. I mean, this, at least to convince me, let's put it that way.
I think when you put this in your portfolio, there's like these section blow-ups. I think it'd be nice. I can see the section is the coolest part, I think. I mean, the most compelling. Like, this amount of detail is crazy. The plans are good too. But there's a project that I was thinking about while the other reviewers were talking. I'm putting it in the chat window. You can check it out after. There was a 1988 proposal for a kind of technological research tower in Nantes, France. It's very generic in the way that it's displayed. This is an old associate of that did this, but it's an amazing project. And I think there's a good set of drawings there to kind of guide you through how you could display this whole thing, especially that long section in EXO. So check that out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Corey. The only thing I'd like to add, I think, kind of got to it at the end here, which is the I guess more detailed architectural interior feel, you know, rather than it being an engineering solution. And I would kind of zoom out even more and ask yourself, what is the system that would make this kind of building viable? Kind of like, when I rent an apartment here, am I subscribing to everything? Am I subscribing to a wardrobe that gets delivered every day? Am I subscribing to food? Like, maybe this whole model is like very just alternative. And I think if you kind of zoomed out and defined more, what would that economic system be for this thing to work? You could start to develop more of an attitude in the drawings, and especially the renderings. You know, what would that be like if it wasn't just about drones coming in? It's actually about me being able to have a new wardrobe every single week that's very unique and different, and I get to try out everything. Like, I think that starts to address the issue of like technology meeting leisure in the unit. So maybe it's multiple scales you gotta think on, but I do want to second just like the thoroughness of the drawings, like kind of the delirium of the tech in the units and the basketball courts and the sections. It's been fun to see you draw that. So I really hope you take like Dan's example here serious and just keep drawing it more to get into your portfolio, to look like, make it more real for yourself. There's still work to be done. And one final thing that is really important, that ground plane, it meets the street, right? You talk about services and hiding them, and yet the post office storage area takes up such a large percentage of the ground floor. I simply think, why didn't you just excavate and make a basement floor for packages, you know, and give that ground floor back to the people, to the street? But again, just a lot of ideas, a lot of things to look at. So thank you for providing that material for everybody to talk on.
Of course.
So let's move into Kyle. Thank you, Corey. Kyle Zahn is up next. Kyle, are you there?
I'm present and accounted for.
There you are. Present. All right, so go ahead and share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here on a Sunday, everyone. I know it's not what we would probably want to be doing or what we all imagined, but here we are. Okay. Everyone can see okay? Seemingly so. Okay, I'm seeing that's not. Okay, so hello, my name's Kyle Zahn, and I did my thesis on the anomaly of autonomy. And what that is referring to is thinking ahead into the future about 15 years and projecting what will happen with car dealerships with the presence of autonomous cars. Dealerships take up a very large footprint, and so will that still be required in the future? But before we go forward, we have to look backward and look at history. Oops. And so there's two timelines here. One of them is looking at dealerships, the other at cars. And so I'll just hit on some of the highlights here. And that around the turn of the century, the first dealerships came to the United States. They sold electric cars, steam cars, and gas cars, all very minimal at the time. Come the 1930s, planned obsolescence or slowism came to be, and that's why we now have different model cars every year. And that isn't the primary reason, but the whole keeping up with the Joneses and new features, new models came to be in the 1930s. The 1950s were a big decade. The big three were firmly established, so General Motors, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler automobiles, which has changed over the decades. The Interstate Highway Act also came to be during this time, and that connected the country. Not only did it connect the country, it also acted as a means of atomic escape at the time, which is kind of forgotten. And then in the 50s, what we commonly refer to as the sticker price came to be from the Monroney. He was a senator, Senator Almer Stillwell Monroney. He introduced the sticker price because before that, cars could be sold at any cost. Going into cars have had different stylings over the decades. And so in the 20s and 30s, it was all about opulence and extravagance. In the 1940s, Pontaine styling came to be. And what that is what we commonly use today is like the unibody or one seamless flowing shape. The 50s and the 60s and the 70s, America was going for all the different crazy colors. In the 50s, it was pastels. In the 70s, it was muscle cars and these candy metallic paints. Over in Europe was downsizing cars and making them more efficient. Come the 80s, all the styling cues and colors had gone away and things were now boxy and about ergonomics. And then in the 2000s, we kind of combined the two, touching on the styling of the 40s and the functionality. And then that leads us to today and where we are today. Ooh. Why does it keep doing that? Okay. So on the left here, we have a diagram of the levels of autonomy. This is an established thing. So on the top, it is showing humans and their level and intrigue in this versus the car. And so it starts off on the left where the human needs to be present, everything needs to be done, we need to pay attention to everything. And then through time, within the next 10 years, it'll be fully automated. Right now, we're at the stage of where we have hands-off technology, where we can use Bluetooth, cruise control, adaptive cruise control, or like lane changing, those sort of features. And the cars are getting smarter and smarter. And so where does that lead us in terms of program? So in focusing on dealerships and program, I intend to use the dealership aspect, kind of touch on this museum aspect as a place for nostalgia, because if autonomous cars take over, we'll lose the driving experience. And then obviously making it a destination, a resort, a place to go see. So what could the dealership be in the future? That is the big question. And so there we go. The site I chose is in Temecula, California. It's about an hour north of San Diego, about an hour and 20 minutes south of LA. Like most dealerships, it's in a chain of dealerships. It's located right off the 15 freeway. So if you've ever driven from here to LA, chances are you've driven right past the site and maybe have or haven't noticed it. It's the standard, has the standard dealership look. It's a franchise, and so they are held to a certain aesthetic. The one thing that is especially cool about this specific dealership is that once a month, this Temecula has a local car community that actually gets together. And so this specific dealership will clear out its entire lot and have a car show once a month for everyone. So moving on to the site plan. So right here is the existing Ford dealership, and in the back is currently just a storage facility for extra cars, parts, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I intend on putting my proposal behind the dealership and kind of a warehouse. Skipping slides. Anyways, okay, so quick section. Part of this building, it's mostly an open warehouse or hangar. Sorry, it keeps skipping around. It's a big open warehouse for the most part, and it takes styling cues from a Ford car, which you've been seeing throughout this presentation. But it's intended to be a museum, as a place to go and experience driving. And the one feature that I really wanted to implement there was, if autonomous cars take over and we can't drive, how, like, the sense of driving and that experience. And so a place to use these museums is where you can go in the car and kind of with technology use a 360 simulator or VR or something and experience what it would be like to drive in a presumably safe space, because humans have become a hazard with automation becoming so efficient. And so it's a place to experience this nostalgia and this memory of driving. And so with that, with autonomous cars, like, who knows where the world will be in 10, 15 years, whether we'll still be driving or if that's an option. But what can we do with dealerships and all the square footage that they take up is what I'm aiming to achieve here. So that's all.
How's the public going to find your museum? It seems like it needs something to announce itself in a way, right? Or is there a way to see this easily from the road?
So this specific view that you're looking at right now is actually taken from the freeway, and there's this dealership sits right on top of a hill, and with current height limits, nothing will be able to be above that to obstruct that view. So if you're passing on the freeway, you'll be able to see it, and then I have it also situated taller than the existing dealership, so it will stand out on the opposite commercial, like not commercial, but more residential, more city side.
So what's the basic idea? One more time, I think you explained it, but I just kind of want to get a better feeling for it. The purpose of the museum is to acquaint people with the way driving experience used to be, because we're assuming that it's all going to be autonomous in the next 20 years or so, which I think is a good assumption, actually. But is that the idea, the basic idea of the museum?
Yes, correct. A place to go where you can experience. I mean, right now it's very common and we drive all the time. Well, maybe not in quarantine presently, but overall we drive a whole lot, and 15 years down the road, maybe we won't. And so kind of like an arcade, you go and play arcade games for that nostalgia and that experience. This could be a place to experience driving in that same manner.
How does the entry and the architecture and the spatial qualities set you up for this? How is that building enhancing that idea?
The building itself is more reflective upon a car model of the time. And then just within that, there's like this previous image is essentially a simulator where you can move the cars around in the museum, and if you wanted to drive whatever model car that was in the museum, they could move it in front of the simulator, and you could start it up, or however it would go would be the intention.
But to get to the simulator, you're going to have a spatial sequence, right? That's going to take you through something to get to here. What's that about?
Correct.
What's all of that about?
I don't have a floor plan showing it, but as with most car museums, there's rows of cars, and there's either an aisleway, either down the center or along the side, to be able to move cars, because in storing cars, they can't just sit still forever, otherwise they deteriorate. So cars actually need to be moved every 2 weeks, whether it's just to kind of move the tires or turn the engine over. So I'm lacking a drawing to show that.
Why you're avoiding the architecture? Why you're avoiding to see? Because I saw you created a very thorough kind of diagram of the evolution of cars, and it seems you spent a time in there trying to tell us all that, and there was a lot of time. I see your time was invested in those things, in saying the history, understanding the evolution, knowing about the cars. But why we don't have that investment in the architecture? Is there a reason why you want to kind of step back and not show us the architecture? Because it's kind of difficult to understand where's your building, and what is the type of building, and what is the architecture you're building.
It wasn't necessarily an act to hide the architecture. It was more so in that it's simplistic architecture, and that it's just a very large open space or hangar. It's not trying to be like the Guggenheim with the spiral or the Porsche Museum. It's not trying to be a museum that's a wonder, like the Peterson Museum or anything like that. It's meant to be a place to go and experience driving. And so it's more about the experience than the architecture, and maybe that's doing myself a disservice.
Well, because I don't understand what is the experience. This looks a little bit flat in many ways. I don't understand what is the experience spatially and how I'm going to experience. So when you talk about experience and the level we are going to engage in there, I think you brought the project and you took us there, and then suddenly, boop, where is the project? I don't know how the space is, right? So I don't know. I think that something went there, that you had all this information, suddenly the translation of this information into architecture. I would like to see it.
Can we look at the section again? Because that's, I think, the best thing we had to look at was the section to get an idea of something. Can we look at that again?
Yeah, it should be going. There we go. It's very small.
So walk us through the sequence. You know, we understand that this is the big warehouse volume, but how do you see the human experience in this building getting to that space that we were just looking at?
So
zoom in for us, Kyle.
I will try. Try, and hopefully my computer will. Anyways, while this is figuring itself out, the experience would be coming around the dealership, and then the second render I showed you. This is not going well. Essentially, the arrival, it's kind of like a hangar with a big glass door, and so you can see all the cars. So, okay, my computer's doing its own thing, so hopefully you're following along. But you'd come along here, and this would be your front experience. So you kind of go through the dealership as is and past the service center, and then come around here to see this warehouse. And so the first thing you see would be what was pictured in that original render, in this warehouse with all these cars, and you can see right into that. And so that's where you would enter and approach, and you would just walk right in there. I wanted it to seem open and inviting, and so that's your approach into the space. Let's see if I can go back to the section. It's got quite a lag, so when I click on things, it's taking a while to adjust. So that would be coming from the right-hand side over here, entering, and it would just be an open area of cars, an open atrium, essentially. And then above that, there'd be like a viewing deck to where you can go above all these cars and see them, because that's seeing things from above gives you a different perspective. And then more towards the back here, where it's shaded and the roof isn't open to this giant skylight, is where you would have that the render I then showed with the car in front of the screen, which is, to Marcel's point, the experience I was trying to get at.
Doesn't that want to be something pretty special in the space? It seems like where that's located now is kind of generic, or it needs to have some kind of sub environment that you're creating for that moment where you get to that, because that's going to be a pretty important moment, right, in your scheme?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in a 360 simulator or essentially had a VR headset on. It's an experience. So, but all you need is a screen. So I don't know if that addresses your point.
But does the screen need to be curved, or can the screen enhance that experience? And is the space that you're in, before you're immersed into the car experience, is there a pre-experience before that? Just like when you get into your car, that's an experience, walking in to your car and getting positioned in your car, that sort of thing.
So the idea would be that you come in from the right and you see all these cars, and then if you wanted to, you could hypothetically drive one of these cars in front of the simulator. So you'd pass by all these cars and look at all of them, and then you could see the one you wanted to drive in front of the simulator, and then you could go hypothetically drive it. And so you have to make your way through everything else to get there, and it's kind of located in the middle of the building for that reason. You have to see everything before you get to your experience.
I sort of agree with the comment about it seems like this part of your project needed way more development, and the whole history thing maybe could have been summarized in an easier way. But this portion really needs a lot more development, I think, in my mind.
I think there's just like a general rule, like on this drawing from a representation standpoint, like, you know, all the work you did was in this section, but all that I really see when I look at this at first glance is this image of this car, which is, you know, probably just an image of something off the internet that someone else designed. So I think you're doing your own work a disservice by privileging, you know, sort of like the whole car culture over the spatial interventions that you want to propose. And I think you have a really strong idea for this museum. It just it's like at 10% of, you know, you're in total concept and not in anywhere close to having designed an actual building. So, you know, really, I think, you know, think about how your representation can highlight all the work that you've done, and maybe, you know, maybe there's an editing process that, you know, maybe, you know, sometimes you don't feel so confident about your section, so you think, oh, this looks sexier to have this car here. Don't rely on those sort of mechanisms to make your presentation look better. It doesn't do you any service in terms of your hard work. So.
Comment on that. It wasn't an effort to hide my work or anything. It was just, I mean, this is my thesis, and obviously this is our project, and so this was just a drawing style that I hadn't done before, and I wanted to explore, and so.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but that's what the result is, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
So obviously, I need more work in my efforts.
Yeah, I think the thesis is an awesome idea. This kind of like future dystopian view of car culture, where a place that is hidden amongst the kind of banal places where you'll probably be buying automated cars to go and experience used to feel like to drive. I mean, there's a lot of, first I'll start off with the things that I think are cool. Like, I like your use of color and the amount of work that went into the plan, like the site plan and the crazy context diagram laid into the body of a car. Like, that's sweet. Like, I think it's cool, and the colors kind of like hearkening to the candy paint neon sports car culture is awesome. But at a certain point, there's no building here. Like, there's no, I think you learn about a thesis idea and setting up something that ties in. I imagine you really like cars, which is cool. Like, it's a nice personal expression, but there's no architecture. Like, this section is something, I hate to say it, but you could draw this with a pen when you're expressing shape. The only sense of architecture or presence that I get is that last page where you have this kind of like ghosted, and it's kind of hunkered down. This shape here, like you basically taken a warehouse, pinched it at one end, and tilted it down at one end. So I think there's something there, but I don't know what happened, where your time went between researching the thesis and then starting to design, because in design you literally have a very, very simple plan shape, the section, and this rendering. Like, I don't even know if you have a 3D do you have a 3D model?
Yeah, I do. To address the shape and everything, it's based off of the lines of a car.
No, I see it. I'm just saying you didn't really, like, I don't know how easy it would be for you to open that 3D model right now. I feel like if you design something, you like, was it beyond just the massing shape? Was there more that you designed that you just weren't able to show in this presentation?
It was, I can't open it right now for you, but it's there. It's just, I guess I did a poor job of representing it to all of you.
Yeah, I mean, your interior view with the car and in the virtual reality realm, if I look in I can see trusses and a roof, but it looks like a photoshopped image of a 1940s steel warehouse. Like, it's not even rendered what the character of the building is. Like, I think you told an awesome story, and I like the graphics for sure. There's no doubt that you have that strength, but I think you got to design the building a couple more steps, or you did the research component of the thesis. You know, I don't know when that period of the thesis ended, but you didn't really get into architecture.
It's, you know, and that's the part that we're going to miss when we start all getting into autonomous cars, is the experience and the interaction with the car. And so maybe the way to think of this project is what is our interaction with this building? You know, what is that going to be? Maybe that's a rhetorical question that you can run with as you develop this thing. How are we interacting with this building? What does it have to do with the analog experience of a car as we know it now? And what value does that have in the future? Something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just at a programmatic level, if I come here, why can I not? I mean, did you think about maybe just having like a kind of a track inside for cars that actually feel what it feels like to accelerate and brake, etc.? Maybe I'm not understanding the virtual reality thing, but if I drive really slowly so I don't smash into any other cool cars in there, and then I roll up to a screen, what's different at that point from sitting inside a car playing a video game, experiencing the feeling that at that point, at this point in time that you're designing in, maybe we don't have the feel of, you know, driving on a highway or accelerating. Like, did you think about how you might, like, what do you want the experience to be like? Like just an arcade and playing Donkey Kong or whatever. It's kind of like, instead of having this little tiny control, you're like engaging with a big clunky machine. Like, am I missing something? Like, wouldn't it be better to have like a track in here so you can drive and feel the car?
So that was actually part of my earlier research, and a proposal I had was doing a racetrack on a dealership, and either how could you like link dealerships together to provide a racetrack, or essentially, yeah, looking at that aspect of experiencing it. But the issue I ran into with that is that all of a sudden that grew exponentially and became a very large project, and so that shied me away from doing that, as well as then I was designing a racetrack in my mind, at least.
Is there a and I'm not sure how much precedent research is emphasized in the course, but have you or seen examples of museums that are sort of dedicated to a practice that is no longer part of our everyday lives? I mean, I would be interested to know if this has been accomplished in some form at some point, and sort of how the architecture accounted for sort of like the nostalgia aspect.
I did not look into it in that regard in my research. Something I did come across though was Fiat over in Europe has a racetrack actually on one of their roofs, and so there are some areas where racetracks are part of like not necessarily a dealership, but part of a manufacturing plant or process. And so I did look into that a little bit, but not directly the nostalgia aspect that you're referring to.
I just wonder, because this is a strange hybrid between a museum, which, you know, or in a way a memorial, which, you know, there are plenty of examples of memorials and sort of the design and spatial implications of trying to, you know, recall something that no longer exists, and then, you know, something that's active, right? And so it's this weird hybrid, and it might be worth your time to sort of think about this aspect of memorial and how that plays into, I mean, I think the way that you're describing the space is very functional, but in a way it's a lot about memory and the experience of approaching these cars. In a way, it's like you're sort of descending into history, or you're descending into, or, you know, you're sort of transitioning to a time and place that no longer exists. And so there's something about that process of approaching this this practice of actually, driving the car that, can be heightened and dramatized spatially. So I don't think that's something that if I were doing this project, I would think of it from that perspective.
To me, what you just described would be a museum, though, wouldn't it? A place of, I mean, I guess that's what you're saying, is finding a case study that represents that.
Well, I mean, what's the difference between a museum and a memorial? In a way, a museum is a collection, but what you're really doing is you're trying to reinvigorate an experience that no longer exists in a way which is dead, right? And so there's this aspect of memory and loss that I think, it's probably partially present in a museum, but because it's more of an experiential theme, it's not so much about just looking at something. It's the feeling of driving that you're trying to bring back. So I think there's just a little bit more complexity to it.
Yeah, I think that's a good question to leave on, Kyle. It gives you another way to look at the project, just simply, experience, program, time. So I think that's a good one to end on. The only thing I'll reiterate is, I think you said shy. I heard people say timid. I think a lot of it is you've just been too timid, and that hasn't lived up to the strength of the idea and the strength of the context that you painted for us in the future, based on the assumptions you've made in terms of autonomous cars that we're all willing to buy into, and we like to enter on that journey with you. But ultimately, just too timid. You didn't show us enough to realize the strength of that. So I think we'll call it over, unless someone has another comment to add.
Just one more thing. I think it's really important to decide what it is that you want to show, whether it's actually driving or what is that experience that we're going to miss. I think you need to define what that is, and then try to illuminate it somehow with the architecture. I just wanted to say that. I think it's really important.
Cool. Well, thank you all.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Okay, so next up we have Gio Sandoval, Icon Architecture. I will copy the site into the chat so you could pull it up. So Gio, go ahead and take it away.
And you can see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Oh, hello, my name is Giovanni. So thank you to be here today. My topic is icon architecture. Let me show this full screen. So what makes architecture buildings iconic? So iconic buildings are symbols that represent a city, a symbol that has a connection value to people. Iconic buildings are generally identified differently in terms of design, style, and building style. Size and building style, sorry. For me, symbolize the connection with people, influenced by mythology, architecture, for recognition of a city. So how does an icon look like in South Bay, San Diego? This is how it's gonna look like. It's kind of like floating, kind of like floating on the water. So this is my site, or this is the site map. It's in San Diego. As you can see right here, these red marks are the icons from San Diego. And this is interesting that there's in this dashed line, blue line, we have like an interesting area on the bay to propose an icon. So my site is located in a small beach in South Bay, and it looks promising for an icon proposal with the views to Coronado, downtown, and Imperial Beach. So I did an axonometric site study to understand the site for the buildings, parks, street, walking trails, the topography, and also the bay. These are some of the images from the site. This is the beach, it's Chula Vista. So this is my site. I just want to extend the G Street to be like the main entrance to the building. All this industrial buildings around it, so I just want to extend it and have a like extended pier to the water, and then propose my building in between the boat trail and the land. So the design of the icon. So to create an icon building, I have to look into the economic basis of San Diego, which are naval, biotech, and tourism. So following these three bases can provoke a technique system that can be a symbolic representation of the South Bay of San Diego. So the first one is the naval. I take the shape of the sail to give me the shape of the building. Just give me a second. All right, because I can hear you. You can see it very well. So the number two, number two, I take it from the biotech. I get into the DNA, the nucleotide base, and it gives me these shapes, the icosahedrons, which give me the structure of the building. The third one is tourism. These are some of the points that people visit around San Diego, and it gives me the floors of the icon building. So I'm going into the structure of the icon. So this is an icosahedron, which I take it from the biotech. I start for the icosahedron. I open the face, the top and bottom. I rotated it. It gives me the structure. I just stack it in, and it gives me the facade of the building. You can see right here a render inside the structure. There will be people circulating and use it to experience something inside this structure. So this is kind of like the circulation diagram as an axle and elevation through the floors. So this is how can people experiment to circulate inside the structure facade and also inside the building. This is kind of like a grid structure to give me the columns. So I did a 20 feet square grid system, and I just get the shape from the floors, and it gives me a structure per floor for the first, second, and third floor. This is kind of like a small video how it's the overall structure proposed. So it's the first floor, second floor, the third, kind of the roof, and then the facade structure. So the program of the icon, it's to create a place where you can enjoy a good coffee and a unique art gallery experience with an open library that provides a unique environment for everyone. So I jump into the first floor. This one show like a gathering space notion, the first floor, like taking a coffee, and then there'll be like open areas. This kind of the renders how it looks from the first floor. The second floor, it's the main thing, it's just old library. Some of the meeting rooms, private rooms, open tables, and library tech that you can do research from, like some computers and all that to read. This is how it looks like on the second floor. The third floor mainly is just an open gallery and a place that you can see the paintings, and obviously you can see the structure from the inside of the building. It's kind of the roof plan of the site, and this a render from the G Street entering to the park, going into the building. So this is a building that characterized the silhouette to create a place to make it phenomenal and capable of radiant uniqueness in the South Bay area. The surrounding textures of the bay, the access and the circulation through the structure, its forms, and its special spaces can determine the icon from South Bay, San Diego. Thank you. That's it.
Nice level of detail and development. Can you, I think I missed this. I understand how the three shapes that are indigenous to San Diego, from the naval, the biotech, and the tourism, shape your structural module. But does this shape, what shapes the building? What gives the massing of the building?
It's this one. The novel shape, I get the shape from the scale. So, and this one is most like the structure for the biotech. So this one is the shape, the entire building shape. It's a triangle.
Uh-huh.
And this is for the structure for the facade. And this is other for the floors.
And what are these pieces here?
So this one is the point where people move around in San Diego.
Okay, gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
then it gets moved up.
So does that, I like the graphics, and I like that you're relating. I think we can go into more the how do you adapt an icon to this part of San Diego. I like that all the inputs are there. That process, all these shapes was not clear to me. I was like, which one of these? I see the icosahedron going into the space frame, the kind of facade system. That makes sense to me. But the massing of the building, like the sail and then the floor slabs, I think one, you need to take out one of those elements, like the floors. If you go to those floors, do those floors, that shape and those points, when you're in the building, when you're standing on these floor plates, does it orient you to where you can see the airport, Coronado, Old Town, or is this just literally the shape of that map stuck into the building?
Yeah, the shape of the map that gives me. I just try to connect the points, and then I just follow the lines and give you the floors for the building.
So there's, once you're in here, there's no visual connection to the points that are making the shape. I don't think there is from seeing it. I mean, there's nice views and whatnot, but I feel like you're trying to rationalize the shape. The shape and the architecture are nice. I think it's a cool building, actually. It's just kind of like the first project we looked at today. I feel like there's a disconnect between what is shaping it and what it is at the end. Like the architecture is interesting. You have that going. The building is cool. I just think you need to tell the story differently. I feel like you could take this part out, because what's really driving the floor shape is the massing. This kind of almost like a tapered wedge in plan, and it looks like an elevation and section, right? It's like a truncated opening. I feel like it's too confusing. You have too many different connections to very different things. Like, I think you need to focus that ship sail icon, showing how that, you need one more set of diagrams showing, okay, some ships that are typical to San Diego's bay. Here's the sails, the shapes that they typically are. Here's how I connected that to a mast that then opens towards the view. That would be much clearer. And then I found my facade system in a biotech molecule. And those two things together, I feel, represent, I think you need to tell the story of the rationalization of the architectural geometry better. This was too confusing.
I mean, I feel like if this shape were more related to directly what was happening on the ground at the site with the adjacencies, then it would make sense. But it's just a little bit abstract, and there's a level of sort of getting down to the neighborhood scale that would benefit the storyline. And I agree. I think the architecture is interesting, and I really appreciate you go back up to slide 14. The layering of all the levels, or maybe it wasn't that. I think it was the video. It's really clear. Yeah, if you can go through that. So what is that? So that's the ship the sail, and then that's like the structural aspect. The second level,
Yeah, just
and then the roof. And
yeah,
is the roof related to the iconography of the sail? Where's
no,
the
just
shape of the roof coming from?
the roof is just to let lighting in and just making something not just flat. I'm just gonna make something following the structure from the facade.
Yeah.
And
What I
then
really,
that's what we do.
yeah, I think what I really appreciate about this building is that it feels really permeable. It feels really friendly to the adjacencies that I imagine are there, just abstractly. And so I think starting to think about in more realistic terms, kind of what's happening on the ground level and how this triangular shape and the floor plan itself can relate to, you know, if you think back to project one, you know, the alleyway and sort of thinking about that threshold between the ground and the building would make it even stronger. But I think it's quite beautiful. I really like it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the architecture is a nice outcome. Back to some of the earlier slides. There was one slide that you had where you showed this district of icons, the whole, you know, like a string of pearls around the bay, and I thought that was very interesting in terms of, you know, what does that mean in the way that you're developing maybe viewpoints from your building. You know, do you want to be able to reflect on any of those icons with your building? Is that an opportunity, I guess? And if you looked at all of those places as a network, you know, is that network form something that is going to inspire your project? Because it seemed like you had one slide, I think it was slide 11. By the way, it's great that we could talk about all these diagrams. This is what's making your project very rich, is that we got all these diagrams to talk about. So let's go to diagram 11 for a second. So that to me is kind of an interesting idea of a network, you know, and as maybe something that you could be developing, you know, as part of your project. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, maybe there's a level of critique on your project where you go back to these sources of inspiration and what kind of diagram they made, and sort of check through your project one more time and see if you know, you're taking full advantage of the place, you know, the way that it's out in the bay. Now all of a sudden you're exposed to all these views. Have you taken advantage of that as well as you can? Are the structural elements clear enough? Could there be more refinement in the structural elements of this project? Do you have the potential of some of these things competing with each other? I don't know. I'm just offering up ways you could look at this thing. But I agree, the architectural outcome is very, very nice right now. Can it be refined and be even more strong? I think so. But I think at that process, maybe you need to reverse engineer a little bit and go back through your process again and see what comes out of it.
Gio, I think I have a little difficulty understanding the iconic. What is it still? What makes you saying what is the question of iconic and what is iconic? And still I think that we're missing why the relevance of making iconic and how you're doing it to your architecture.
Well, first, I want to make something iconic, something like a symbolized, something as a reference for San Diego, because we have the Coronado Bridge, we have some buildings that are icon, but not that icon. You can do research and say, oh, this is San Diego, just seeing one building. I don't know. I think it's
what makes how do we in history and examples or things that we in this question, what are the elements that we consider makes an iconic building, or why do we really want to have an iconic building, right? And I think that we'll question that a little bit, to think about it a little more thoroughly and how that is being displayed in your project. I think there's something issue. I think that your project in many ways reminds me that there's a limit of accessibility to the waterfront, that the majority of the waterfront has been controlled by the Navy, has been controlled by government, has been very limited in the accessibility to the waterfront. And the idea is maybe for me, I don't know if the iconic is more like how this is almost like a protest, a building that is protesting their lack of accessibility to the waterfront. And then you're finding these moments of accessibility as a way to say we need to kind of bring back the territory, we need to kind of extend even more territory by producing this new island or this new object that is saying if we are limited, if they are taking land of accessibility, how you're constructing more land and accessibility in that sense, and this will become iconic because we're constructing a new land, a new condition that we are taking back the waterfront that belongs to everybody.
Cool.
And I think you need to know things that have a more a way that they can resonate just because it's the gymnastics of form or shape, but that these geometries has a more intricate kind of way to connect to society and connect in the mindset and the psychology of society that is not just form making. And I'm really concerned, sorry to be here, but I'm concerned when things are just bumping into form and not really designing form, and I'm concerned in that relationship. So for me, once again, I think that the project, even those things, the shapes and the elements, can be understood more of how you're expanding territory, even you're building, how, for instance, the amount of territory you're constructing by looping and saying 3 loops, 4 loops, and then saying how the territory is expanding to the levels of how people are going to engage in the waterfront. Because if it is just coffee and a museum, I think that there's a whole range of people that we need to consider that is not just about the bourgeois kind of thing of coffee in the museum. We need to think about the different spectrum of society we're talking about. Because your project is it's an architectural project, but it has a very urban aspect of it.
Okay.
Almost reminds me of the Alexandria Library that burned down in history. You know, this you know, that level of you know, being important within the Bay. But then at the same time, is that really right? Is that, you know, is that the proper way to investigate this? I don't know. It's just a question in my mind.
Yeah, I think, I don't know San Diego so well, but I feel like this reminds me of a couple type of projects where, are you doing the icon because you feel like this part of San Diego is undefined and it needs something as a calling card for this area?
Yes, because I noticed that most of the people, they go into the downtown and going up. So they know to go to Chula Vista. Like they don't know Chula Vista, so I want to bring something that can people move more on this loop in the Bay.
I also don't know, do people use this part of the bay for like, I just looked in Google Maps, it looks like there's a shipyard construction site right next to it. Is this part of the bay, are there people out in boats and like fishing and water skiing and things like that, or is this more industrial?
It's more industrial, but they have some places that you can fish in that water. But I don't recommend you fish on the bay, maybe.
I'm just saying, I think that the decision to push this thing out into the water is, first and foremost, the thing, it reminds me of the Sydney Opera House, the sail metaphor, kind of providing an icon. So you could summarize. And I think the architecture is nice and it's powerful and it would be an icon for sure. I think, but I think at an urban level, there's a nice park there. I feel like this building could sit in that park and it would still be very powerful. By pushing it into the water, you are making a very clear statement like this. What is here is not strong enough to give definition, so I got to put, you're really showing it off. So then if that is the idea, if you go to the plan, the first floor plan, and one more zoom in. Okay, so such a big effort, yeah, that plan right there, to place this building out in the water. Okay, I see there's a boardwalk that comes out towards the entry, but then that boardwalk, like this is something I thought of when I was looking at this, like why does it go all the way around and pretend that there's not a building there? Like you basically took a sidewalk out. Like why is the boardwalk not part of the facade? You know, this is just from a urban standpoint and a landscape standpoint, the building itself is an observation deck. Like why do you need to put this? Are there multiple doors that you're not showing that the building is porous from all sides? What is the point of that deck? What is the integration with the landscape? Like, should there be bigger areas of deck that spill out from the cafe? Like, why is it so separate? And then also, one layer in, with your facade structure, why is it so thick? I noticed in some of the drawings that you did of the structure, it looked like you could almost occupy the structure. So what is happening at those two levels, at the between the building and the water, and then in the building wall?
Well, okay. First, for the exterior, for the landscape, I just wanted to do this here like an extension for the landscape because it's a small bit, so I just want to extend it all around this here. But okay, the other question was, sorry, what was the other question?
Oh, well, I'm just wondering that it would make sense to me if the boardwalk did not go all the way around the building, if it just came into the building. And then you're there and the water's coming up to the edge of the building and it's a very strong connection. But it looks like it was important for you to take the park's path and wrap the building. But it's just, it doesn't look very developed. So I'm wondering why did you add that there? And then the second question is the same. Why is the wall so thick? What's happening in the wall, in your structure?
I just want to give like a different experiences. So I just want to give the experience for outside the building, inside the structure, and then inside the building. So you can have like two different experiences in the same area, and the building inside and outside.
Yeah, that's one area. I think there's two areas with the architecture that I see some room for improvement. A section, kind of an enlarged section from the edge of the walkway that's outside through the facade, through a little bit of the interior to show what happens all around, because that's not very clear. It's kind of, the boardwalk happens to be the same dimension as your structural space frame. And then the second thing, I think, if you go to one of these interior renderings, I think you gotta, just in the same way that you situated the shape of your building from what is uniquely San Diego and this area of the Bay, I do that with materials here. There's too much going on. Like it's rich. There's no doubt that even if everything was white, you made a rich piece of architecture. The roof is cool, but I wonder at an architectural element scale, I don't know, could the structure be wood? Could I feel like you need to tone these down.
Okay.
Some specific decisions about materiality that can help situate this building even more. Like if you look at, I don't know if it does, it reminds me of the interior of the Oslo Opera House by Snøhetta, where there's all these different spaces and you can see into different circulation zones. And the roof is really awesome, but there's too much going on. So I think you need to, that's one more layer. Like I would start with the structure. Is the structure better if it's heavy timber Does that relate to the boat building in a better way that makes this feel like it's supposed to be where it is? Or you could take the opposite approach and just say, no, I want it to just feel like totally alien and new. But you got to make some clear distinctions, because right now it's like almost hard to see what's going on inside. I can see people in the wall now here.
Yeah, so the idea is just all steel and then glass for the steel for the facade, and you can see from inside, and also you can like the light from outside coming into the inside.
Yeah, I think they're just, you have everything in place now, but I would try to simplify the palette and make clear what's unique about the building. So this thing with the people standing in the wall, I want to see a section through that, because there the water's coming right up to the edge of the building, which is a powerful feeling. You're almost like in a submarine with the water splashing up against you, but that's not what you have drawn and planned. You have a whole other layer outside of that.
Okay.
So
I also double think that it looks like you're representing a pretty wide amount of landscape all along that boardwalk, and I think even just modeling that and seeing how that really having that thick edge kind of how it's going to affect the interior experience in a way that you might want to think twice about, because I think the whole this great facade with this permeable feeling that you created is really contradicted as soon as you start to introduce this band. And so thinking about ways that maybe you start to punctuate it or remove it entirely, so that you actually are creating this experience that you see on the left with the water sort of feeling like it's coming into the building. It's going to be
cool. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
It could be like on slide 19. Can you go to 19 for a second? It could be that the bridge itself between the park and the building should be looked at as well. Like, what is your intent? Is your intent to just make that purely circulation, or is there an intent to expand the park? How is the park and your piece interacting with each other? Is it a tenuous connection, or is it a human connection where there's some activity there? So it's another thing to maybe research further in your design, especially if you decide to pull the boardwalk away from the edge and allow this to be more like a ship. Then I think how the connection happens to the ship becomes more important. And that decision needs to be very clear. I think what it is you're doing with that.
Have you? I don't know. It just reminds me of a lot of the late kind of what is going on in New York with Thomas Heatherwick. Have you looked at his projects, the Pier 55 proposal?
No.
No. Take a look at that, and even the vessel. I don't know if they're the good projects or like right. I'm just saying that it seems that you're trying to talk about these things, like the vessel becoming something that is like recognizable, and is all the stairs and suddenly it's there, right? It has been very positive and negative criticism about it, and I want to know what is your point of view on that criticism, and how they're accepting and not accepting. What is the relevance of that piece now placed in New York, trying to do this kind of approach of kind of public and kind of iconic kind of element, the vessel, right? And now the Pier 55, now they're almost finished. I think it's ready to open. What is that piece now that is being done, and you're trying to kind of somewhat replicate these kind of ideas? And how do you critique that? What is your position about those things? I think it's a little bit trying to kind of dig into those things and kind of understand that, because I think there's a lot of things you need to think about of how to approach your project. But I'm saying is that those things, if you clear up those things, your proposals, the way you create spaces, the way you create the series of sequences in your building, the idea of why choosing materiality, these elements will be better informed when you have these kind of notions of how you address these things.
Okay, thank you.
I think also look at the Nemo Center by Renzo Piano in Amsterdam. And it could be, I totally agree with what the last reviewer said. I think setting out for an architectural thesis, like how can I create an icon? If you want to create iconic architecture, I think that's awesome. But I think you've done it. Like there's some simple moves here that I almost feel like automatically yield icon. Pushing out into the water, iconic move. Big building that has no facade. It's just one object, sculpture. Good icon move. So I think distilling out of this to show intellectually you have understood as a way to make turn a building into an icon, which is something greater than itself. I think go back through and distill some of those things so that you can use it in the future, regardless of what context you're working in. But I think also the why aspect, like you need to understand the point of iconic architecture. Like iconic architecture can be used to make a political statement. It can be used to make an urban statement where there wasn't one before in order to give definition to a place that's really needed it. Or it can happen on accident because of how complex and interesting the connection of the building to the site and the architectural language is. I think you have to think about it more than just, okay, I want to make an icon for my thesis. So push a building out in the water and make it cool. There has to be more than that. And I think there's varying levels of buildings similar to this. There's the Kengo Kuma Dundee Museum. You probably looked at that. I get some vibes from this.
Cool.
That one, I have never been there, but it looks horrible as far as a connection to the landscape. The building is really cool, but it looks dead around it. Sydney Opera House, without a doubt, is an amazing icon. But look at the parts that aren't photographed as much, like how it meets the water. And there's a whole cafe that bleeds out into walkways that tie back into the streets and alleys of the city. This Nemo Center by Piano in Amsterdam. And he also did another kind of nautical museum like this in Oslo. So look at those things, and instead of the building shape, I think the next level is looking at how those icons relate horizontally to their context. And that's water, landscape, urban infrastructure, transportation, etc. And these are principles you can take away and take into your career in the future and apply regardless of context.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Well, I think that's a nice comment to take away for you, Gio. Something that you can take on with you. It doesn't end here, so continue to refine your thoughts on all these questions you've posed for yourself. All right, and I would encourage you to seek the kind of more complex understanding of your intentions that the building begins to show us. You know, there's a lot of elements and systems coming together in a pretty well managed way, which I think everybody's noticed is something they find interesting. We'd like to see that same kind of management of all the information and the thinking on icon. We'd like to hear that from you. So continue to seek that out.
Thank you very much. Thanks
all right. Thank you, Gio. Next up, our last presenter today is Ryan McComb. So Ryan, you can go ahead and get started. Share your screen. Ryan's going to take us up to Irvine. I will send everyone the site link now. So take it away, Ryan.
Okay, hello. My name is Ryan McComb, and I'd like to present to you my degree project, the Mediaplex. It's a collaborative incubator for the development of efficient technologies. I'd like to start by reading a quote taken from Elon Musk's USC commencement speech in 2014. I think the first is you need to work. If you, depending on how well you want to do, particularly if you want to start a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch and we showered in the YMCA. We're so hard up that we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. So work hard like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. I wanted to know how I can not only provide a place where this kind of dedication can be facilitated, but how can I take this project a step further and promote the cross-cultivation of ideas between different companies, which could in turn possibly facilitate the development of more efficient technologies. When looking in research and precedents, it includes some of these projects over here. The massing of the Mediaplex was influenced by the cloverleaf shape of the KPMG headquarters. The layout of the private offices was influenced by the office on the roof. And then the idea of the collaborative media labs was influenced by the MIT Media Lab. And then to go over my thesis questions, how can architecture increase productivity for a startup company? Is there a way to cohabitate multiple technology-based startup companies in order to promote the development of highly efficient technologies? And how can architecture facilitate the collaboration and cross-cultivation of ideas amongst different startup companies? The site that I chose is located at 201st American Way, and that's in Costa Mesa, California, which is right on the border of Irvine and Costa Mesa in Orange County. I found that in order to promote this idea of cross-cultivation, I think that we're able to do that in collaborative media labs. It's facilitated by the circulation of the building, and then in passing at any of the amenities and shared spaces. And then now to kind of introduce you to the site a little bit, this is a site overview. It's located inside of the pink rectangle. And then this is a view of the site from the northwest, just currently an empty field. And then here is a view of the site from the northeast, showing the access point onto the site. Now jumping into the site plan in northeast axon view of the Mediaplex. Here showing the vehicular circulation around the site and onto the site. And then pedestrian circulation on this side of the building and how it is accessed from the sidewalk. The 6th floor plan in northeast axon. Vertical circulation. And then the program includes a gym and fitness center, and then a rooftop deck and outdoor fitness studio. Jumping into the 5th through 3rd floor plan. Here you see the circulation and the program, including the private offices and sleeping pods, double elevators in each open atrium, and then spiral staircases in the media labs. Often in a building, there are certain places and hallways that you would never walk by unless you had a reason to be there. But in the Mediaplex, you could just go for a stroll along the trisecting pathway of circulation, which would take you by each different office. Now here, showing a rendering. So this is a rendering from directly on the circulation track, peering into one of the private offices. And I'd like you to notice how the office seamlessly opens up to the circulation track with a perch acting as a buffer at this juncture of program and circulation. And here is a rendering taken from inside one of the private offices. And then this is the private office floor plan, including the workspace, plenty of storage, underfloor storage, And there is a small kitchenette, a bathroom and shower. And then there's also 4 sleeping pods for those extra late nights in the office or for those grinders who never leave the office. Now jumping into the second floor plan. Once again, showing the circulation, showing this trisecting pathway. And then the program of the second floor, this includes all of the collaborative media labs. That's where different ideas can be worked upon depending on what kind of companies habitate this building, including an elevated terrace. And then here is a rendering of one of the media labs with some collaboration going on. And then going down to the ground floor plan, this is where all the shared spaces and amenities are. Circulation. And then the program, including the entrance to the underground parking, administrative offices for the building, a large server room, the reception, a cafe and coffee shop, a landing area and water feature for greeting guests or people who are coming possibly for a meeting, conference rooms, a digital fabrication lab, and a metal wood shop, possibly for working on prototypes. Now jumping into a rendering of the main entrance from One American Way. And now here's the site plan in southwest axon. Vehicular circulation around and on the site. And then here showing pedestrian circulation, you can see a large ramp which brings you down to the ground level. Then here's a rendering of the elevated terrace, showing some people lounging, just kind of hanging out. And as you can see, you can view into the media labs and kind of see what's going on. Those are also visible from the surrounding area. And this completes my quest in providing a place for startup tech-based companies to develop their ideas while promoting the cross-cultivation of ideas amongst them. Thank you.
I was interested in, if you go back a couple slides, are you setting the finished floor a little bit higher than all the sidewalks, like on level 1? What creates the need for that big ramp?
No, the ground floor is at the ground level. If I go to the section, this side of the building is higher. It's like 13 feet higher than this side. On one of the photos I showed of the site, this street right here, which is MacArthur Boulevard, there's an off-ramp on the freeway just off this this image here. So none of these streets are accessed. The street is not accessed by any of these buildings, just because this is kind of like a busy road. So on this side,
you're negotiating a existing condition, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. I just want to say, overall, my first instinct is that this building, I think you've done a great job of thinking about the landscape in a pretty critical way and thinking about the circulation in and around and sort of negotiating some of these grade conditions. So I want to applaud you for that. I mean, I think if you continue to work on this project, you can, think about articulating some of those moves. Like I see that big grand staircase on the right, how can you break that up, make it more inviting, think about areas of, where you would kind of soften all the hardscape. But yeah, I think it's a very dynamic in terms of building footprint, and also again how it's related to the things around it. So I think that looks like an extra effort on your part that I really appreciate.
Thank you.
I have a couple of rhetorical questions, maybe. is this project like a enclave in your mind? Because the pedestrian activity through this part of Orange County, it's not really a friendly pedestrian area around here.
Correct.
So my question is, are you seeing this as more of an enclave on a self-contained think tank kind of expression, or is there going to be connection to the bigger fabric of this place? So that's question number one. And then question number two is, it seems like the program is really stratified through the building, and I'm wondering, is there an opportunity to mix the program more so that it's not so homogenized, you know, or stratified, I guess. Is there a way to mix things more and make them more conducive to ad lib and you know, unscripted kinds of activities that might be very creative? Just those are just two big questions that I have.
Okay, well, to address your first question, somewhat yes. As you said, this part of the city here, it's not too pedestrian friendly. There's a lot of already existing large office buildings. There is some apartment buildings around, and there's a little bit of commercial. So I guess I am in a way thinking of it kind of as its own island, but I did want to find a way to, you know, invite the surrounding community to kind of see what's going on like that. In a way, that's why I have, you know, these media labs opening up to the outside, and as well as like this terrace, which can be, it can be accessed by people walking by. They can come out, kind of hang out on the terrace. I kind of see, you know, maybe that, you know, this could be maybe a little event space here. So yeah, I wanted to, as much as I can, invite the public in and onto the site. But I do see it, you know, as an incubator for, you know, these people who are trying to develop their ideas. And then, I'm sorry, can you address the second question one more time?
Second question was, this seems like your scheme is very stratified.
Program.
Right?
Okay.
Was there a reason for that?
Well, I just kind of, I guess I wanted to organize, you know, the private offices on their own levels, because there could be people kind of, you know, sleeping there late at night, people working. So I kind of wanted that to be its own part of the program. And then with the second floor, the media labs, which is, you know, collaborative, and then the first floor, the shared space. So I guess I did kind of stratify it. I don't really know if I have an exact answer why. I guess maybe like I, you know, the first part of my answer, there could be people sleeping or working on the top three levels. So I kind of just wanted that to be office space, but I guess that's as much as I have for that.
For instance, I think your scheme, the overall, sorry, the overall layout, you have a lot of emphasis on the interior courtyard, so that void spaces you're showing in your section, and even in the scheme saying what is those spaces. I would like to know why is those elements relevant, right? I think they're a big part of your project, and that's one. And the other thing is that how I think that the ideas you have outside, how they can percolate to the inside also, how these ideas of kind of moving and circulating and resting and creating these things, they can be translated to the inside, not to see it totally separate or differentiated. I don't know if you have looked at the work of Clyde Wilkinson and his books and how he even created the Chia Day, one of the first beginning of changing the idea of the typology of the office. I don't know if you took a or have your research into that.
I have not researched into Clyde buildings.
And then I highly recommend this book, The Office in the Graph, The Evolution of Workplace. And I think you need to kind of get into a little bit more in that sense. So notions of how the idea of there's like this concept they're being bouncing around, the fun office, the thing about creating interior urbanism, the interior within the interior, all these notions, I think there will be interesting to kind of see them and question that and saying how your building is, or your position in relationship to that. But I will just say that there's ingredients there that could be very interesting to kind of really take advantage of those conditions. Like, once again, you put that section. I think that right now is lacking really how these spaces are taking advantage, how these things can be translated from inside and outside, how these elements are not just only one level to the right conditions, that the thickness that you're constructing in that plenum it's just to create 3 or 4 steps is a missed opportunity. I think there's the ingredients are there, but we need to kind of expand that and the different usabilities of this notion. And I would say that the problem of these spaces in the office sometimes is the sense of belonging, the different scales that the persons are part of it. When you're part of a group of 5, a group of 10, a group of 15, when you perceive yourself part of the company, individual, this sense of scale and the relevance of spaces in relationship to scale have a big part in office making.
Yeah, I think you made some really good points there. It would have been nice this year if we would have had more studio time, so I could have talked with you earlier and got, picked your brain a little bit.
I'm there.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Well, yeah, I mean, because of what happened.
What happened? Yeah.
And and the scale of the offices, and that's kind of one of the reasons I think I included these media labs. Not only for collaboration, but kind of like an overfill area or an overspill area. When more space is needed. And yeah, I think I could take this a step further and make a little more connection from the inside to outside. Yeah, like these large central atriums. My first reasoning for including them is, they will bring in so much light to the building, and I think natural light is a very important thing when in an office setting. So that's kind of why I included them. And what's going on inside of the atriums, I thought that out with program, the server room, a landing area for greeting guests, but I could definitely, I think, take that a step further. I do agree with you.
I have a question for you that might be a little bit difficult to answer, but I live not too far from this site, and my observation of Irvine is that there are a lot of office buildings that have for rent signs on them, and there's not a lot of, this area particularly along MacArthur Boulevard, and I'm wondering, if anything you've learned or observed here, do you think that you could apply to, say, more of an adaptive reuse strategy for an existing building? And B, if anything you learn here now that we are experiencing for the first time this notion of maybe people won't work in an office, maybe we will be working more at a distance. If you've started to think more critically about this as a strategy going forward in the work world, or maybe if there's lessons to be learned that you think could be applied more strategically in the future.
Well, for the first part of your answer, I guess I didn't really look into adaptive reuse. No. And then the second part of your second question, this whole pandemic occurred halfway through our semester.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no. So had that have happened last year, before I started my research and my thoughts on what I wanted to, do for my degree project, it definitely could have, played a role in how things panned out and how I structured things, but I guess at this point, I'm just looking forward to, like I'm sure the rest of you, for this to end so we can, go back to how things, hopefully were before. So yeah, it maybe would have, I'm sure as with a lot of my peers, it definitely may have changed our ideas and our projects a little bit, but unfortunately,
it's not really a critique on what you decided to do. I'm just sort of curious because it's something I think about a lot. Like for instance, you had some pretty detailed floor plans, and I really appreciated the one that you had of the little office. I mean, is that something that scale wise you think could be translated into, that seems applicable for just like, deploying in people's homes or something to that effect? Just something, I maybe it wasn't worth bringing up, but just seems to me like that's where my mind was going, considering things have changed so much. But
Can I just drop in for a second? Because
Yeah.
we have an office of about 40 people right now, and I started thinking about what are the live workspace possibilities for the future, and just what's happened, for us to all now be, basically sheltered in place at home and not being able to work close to the office. You start wondering about, okay, what does that mean for live work in the future? Could you have a 40-person office with a shared housing situation, and what would that be like, and what would be the advantages of that, to have that kind of mix going on? And then, that's just a big open question. Then the other thing is the courtyards, the way that your project has developed around the courtyards, that it has sort of a hotel-like quality now, the way the circulation works. And it makes you start to think, what would happen if there were spaces that were vertical, that, could there be a townhouse that went 2 stories in that courtyard? Or are there office spaces, or are there other kinds of spaces that could really take advantage of the volume of those courtyards and be partially in those spaces and be able to appreciate the volume? So I think my earlier comment about this thing being very stratified, it seems like it's stratified horizontally, and it's also feels like it's stratified vertically too. It just seems like there needs to be more investigation of 3-dimensional possibilities, and just thinking about the program of living and working needs to be thought about some more in my mind.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess, these media labs are, open from the 2nd floor all the way to the top.
Yeah.
I actually do think that is an interesting idea about, maybe in the future, how could this building adapt by these large open central atriums? Like, could there be something added to them? That's actually a really interesting thought, that now that you bring it up.
I wanted to know what you modeled the build. It looks like, is it a Revit model?
No, I actually modeled it in Rhino.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, one, on an overall massing point of view, well, I'll get to that question after, but if you go to some of your exterior renderings.
Like the very first slide?
No, that's hard to see. No, the ones that are down at the ground level. Even the interior, to the point I'm about to make. Your project is super rich, layered, and I can imagine coming to work here. Actually, I would say from a program standpoint and kind of to the point of stratification, it feels like a university building. So keep going a couple more renderings. Yeah, like here, for instance. So I think the strength in your project are these information that you modeled in, which made me think you did it in. There's a lot of information here. This is kind of your colleague that did the drone tower. This project is super rich. And then this takes it one step further by connecting down into the context. But I think just rule for everybody to follow. I know it's thesis, so you're so focused on the guts and the program and what you're trying to do. But I think that this project would be so much stronger if you made the exterior the same language as you did the axons. Like by putting wall materials and kind of funky moves like the curtain wall hitting the punched opening wall at a diagonal, that weakens the building because you're trying to make like a revolutionary office environment. But then on the outside, unless this was your goal, and let me know if that's what it was. If you're trying to make an interesting shape, but keep the elevations feeling like the sort of generic commercial architecture that's in this part, maybe that's okay. But I think this is such a special building. And I think if you could push the program further in section, it'll make it even more powerful, like mixing companies and the opportunity to cross-pollinate is awesome. The shape, the voids driven down in. But the hints of the facades and the architecture that I'm getting, and I doubt you're trying to make it feel just like ultra generic, but I think you got to either spend a serious amount of time before you put materials on something, or don't show this level of detail or articulation, because by a very passionately rich program and your axons, like there's a lot of detail. I love the little unit plans. Like I like the stoop on each one because it makes the interior feel like a street, but it's black and white line drawing. So my mind, when I look at this, or this even, without this type of rendering, I think there's this, like, I see it in a lot of projects today. The interior renderings make the exterior colored renderings weaken the architectural statement that you're making with the buildings. I spend more time thinking about materials before you render, and this is going forward too. When you're working out plans and sections, you don't need to think about material other than structure unless that's the real focus of the project. So I feel like this entire package would be compelling if these drawings were just line drawings and maybe put color on materials that you have really, really thought about. You know, like these glass windows, this could be line drawings and be more compelling, because when you start to color and it gets very distracting. And the same for the exteriors. The exteriors, like the little glimpses of the architectural character that I feel from the outside, are very generic and very like, they don't think you thought about them very much, like the way that joints line up and things. They're distracting. So there's a time where you have to zoom out from the building and really look at, okay, what architectural statement from the exterior? What are the materials I want to use? Do I want to use generic commercial office building claddings? And then think about that with the same intensity that you've thought about your program mix.
Okay, thank you. That's actually a very helpful comment. And, you know, this is obviously the final review here, but moving forward, like when this goes into my portfolio,
yeah,
I'll definitely, you know, take that. Maybe I will be better off using renderings that are just line drawings and then kind of, you know, photoshopping materials. Or so yeah, I appreciate the comment and the feedback, and I'll definitely take that into consideration moving forward when this.
Yeah, and I know it's the end of thesis, so you're probably ready to like relax, but this will come up. It comes up if you're going to enter the profession and work on projects with this level of. Usually there's a team, so someone's working on facade, someone's working on structural and mechanical coordination, and like the project architect keeping it all going together. But I think you got to think about all those things. If you think about all those things with the same amount of intensity as you did the shape and the programming, this could be a really incredible, like I would not use generic office language on the outside. I would maybe even use one material and and if you want to make a statement by picking something as generic as like, I dropped into Google, it looks like there's a lot of like faux stone and stucco. So look at some of these bigger. There's a really amazing brick project, the Toulouse School of Economics architects, the ladies that just won the Pritzker Prize, and similar plan and actually section. But you'll see by using 1-2 materials, maybe they've created like a very strong material palette towards the program and the spaces of the building.
Okay, yeah, I really appreciate the feedback, and that's really helpful. I'll definitely, work on that here, before this makes it into my portfolio.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll happen in practice when you're working on projects this rich. Like sometimes areas go ignored until the very end when decisions have to be made, and it can suffer in that way. So I'm just saying, with something so rich, time to not think about the inside as much, like push that to the background a little bit and think about, okay, these little spaces. I love the trefoil shape because you're making small facades. I just looking in Street View, the architecture around this site is horrible. It's like generic office boxes, but you're making almost like little smaller scale facades that you can then kind of come up with a new statement. And I'm sure that that's not what was driving the decision for the form. The form seems to come from the desire for the inside, but you have to think about it from all different scales and angles.
Sure. So do you see each facade having a different language, or do you see each facade kind of following the same language of this building?
Just by looking at that neighborhood and my own sensibilities is that I would pick one top 2 material. Like it looks like you're hinting at kind of I don't know what's going on in the corners in this view. Like, is that a solid panels at the corners, or is that glass?
No, those are, that's like let's see, skin facade. Here you go. Like a skin facade.
They're atriums.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would pick the glazed area, and then I would pick the solid.
That's it.
And I think just from the scale and the shape, like it's not an equal trefoil. It's an interesting shape, so limit yourself to one material to start out with. And what are the parameters you can adjust? Can you change the shape of your windows? Is there some areas where it looks like you almost have like a bay window floating in the background up there? What is the facade? Like, I think some elevations of this building, you have the Rhino model, so do some elevations and compose and think about how the program can come to the outside and go to materials. But don't go to materials without thinking about it, because it's the rest of it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
And I would spend equal time on the sections too. I think the sections still have a lot of possibility in them and how they could be developed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the outside too, but building first.
Okay, thank you.
So Ryan, it sounds like there's a lot of different places where, yeah, it deserves more refinement. But overall, there's some nice resolution that's gotten everybody to talk about it and engage on, their own level as well as the architectural level. So thank you. This is our last student for the day. So I want to just say again a special thanks to everybody who joined us. So Ralph, thank you. Dan, Marcel, Hope, thanks for spending a few hours today with us on Sunday. I hope you're all doing well. Everybody's safe, healthy, well, and hope to see you guys soon in person. So, all right. So that's kind of it. No taco truck or beer. So maybe next year in person, we'll all see you in person and we can enjoy some San Diego tacos and beer.
Yeah.
All right.
Congrats.
Congrats.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to the students.
Yeah, good
Thank you for
job.
all your work.